matters where you're going. And we have to remember, we are a country of immigrants for that very reason. You see, the sclerotic demographics of Europe or Japan, or the tragic demographics of Russia, that would be us, but for the renewal that immigrants bring. And sometimes when I listen to the debate about immigration, this is a country I don't know. A country that would actually think that the children of illegal immigrants born here in this country might not be given citizenship? What are we doing? Immigrants are not the enemy. And America needs to stand tall for them. And then there is the issue, of course, that it cannot just be people who came here that can experience that great belief that it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. You know, we all have our family heroes, and my family's is my grandfather on my father's side, John Wesley Rice Sr., and I love to tell his story. He was a sharecropper's son in Utah. That would be E-U-T-A-W, I'm not kidding, Alabama. And when he was about 19 years old, he decided to get book learning. So he asked where a colored man could go to college. They told him about Little Stillman College. He went to Stillman, saved up his cotton, and paid for his first year through college. And then he got to the second year. They said, how are you going to pay for the second year? He said, well, I'm out of cotton. They said, well, you're out of luck. He said, well, how are those boys going to college? They said, well, you see, they have what's called a scholarship, and if you wanted to be a Presbyterian minister, you could have a scholarship too. My grandfather said, you know, that's exactly what I had in mind. And my family has been Presbyterian and college educated ever since. You see, John Wesley Rice Sr. knew that that education was going to transform him into somebody he might otherwise not have been. But let me ask you, today when I can look at your zip code and tell whether or not you're going to get a good education, can we really say to those kids, it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going? America is a country that's built first and foremost on that belief. That is what holds us together. It's not blood, it's not religion, it's not nationality, it's just a belief that you can come from humble circumstances and you can do great things. And we've got to make it true again for the least of our kids and the least of our people, as well as for those who come from good circumstances. So, we have hard work to do in defending the country and helping failed states heal and advocating for democracy and rebuilding a global economy built on private sector growth and indeed reaffirming the core of who we are. But you know, I'm very optimistic that we will do it. I'm optimistic because we've done it before. In 2006, when things were a little rough in the Bush administration, when things weren't going well in Iraq and Hamas won elections in the Middle East and there was war in Lebanon, and it was hard to get up some mornings, I read the biographies of the Founding Fathers. And you realize that the United States of America should never really have come into being. What with George Washington's troops, a third of them down with smallpox on any given day, and the Founding Fathers squabbling, and here we were against the greatest military power of the time. And yet, we did come into being. And you realize that we fought a civil war, brother against brother, hundreds of thousands of Americans dead, and yet we had the temerity to form a more perfect union. And those people who came across the Continental Divide in covered wagons. Have you ever seen the Continental Divide? They had to be optimists because they didn't even know what was on the other side, and they just kept going. And yes, a little girl who grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, where you couldn't have a hamburger at Woolworth's, but her parents had her absolutely convinced that she could be President of the United States if she wanted to be, and she became Secretary of State.